Okay, let's think way, way back. Not dinosaurs, not even like the familiar bacteria we know. I mean, the very first flickers of life on Earth. How did those first cells even get the energy they needed to start everything?
Right, that's the billion-dollar question, isn't it? Trying to figure out those absolute earliest steps. It's incredibly challenging. So much of the evidence is just gone.
But wait a second, because there's some really cool work happening. We're doing a deep dive today into new research. This is from LMU Munich, and it's in Nature, Ecology, and Evolution. They've actually managed to replicate in the lab how Earth's earliest life probably got its power.
Exactly. And what they're finding is, well, it points towards the first life really thriving in these warm environments, rich in hydrogen. Probably something like the hydrothermal vents deep in today's oceans.
Okay, hydrothermal vents. I think I can picture that.
Yeah, but with a twist. Their research suggests these early life forms used hydrogen, produced methane, and crucially, that the chemistry of the early Earth itself could have just provided that hydrogen continuously.
Wow, okay. So our mission for this deep dive, let's unpack this. How did they do it? What does it mean for, the history of life and maybe even life elsewhere?
Big questions. Let's get into it.
All right. So early Earth, we're talking what, 4 billion, maybe 3.5 billion years ago? Paint us a picture. What was it like?
Imagine a very young, very turbulent planet. Lots of volcanic activity, a different kind of atmosphere. The oceans were there, but they weren't like today's oceans.
Different how?
Well, one key difference, especially for this research, is the water around those hydrothermal vents, the black smokers you mentioned. Back then, it likely had way more dissolved iron.
More iron. Okay. Why is that so important?
Because that extra iron is central to the chemistry they replicated. It's a really crucial piece of the puzzle for how that early energy source might have worked.
Okay, so we see modern black smokers, these plumes coming up from the seabed. Picture that, but with this dissolved iron. How did the researchers actually recreate that ancient scene in a lab in Munich?
They basically built tiny miniature versions of these ancient vents, little controlled systems where they could mix iron and sulfur compounds at high temperatures.
To mimic the conditions?
Precisely. To get those same geochemical reactions going that would have happened on the early ocean floor.
And what were the key reactions? What actually happened chemically in these mini vents?
So the main thing is the reaction between iron and sulfur. It naturally forms iron-sulfide minerals. The study mentions maconite and grigi specifically.
FeS and FeS4, right?
Yeah. And the formation of these particular minerals under those early Earth conditions is really good at producing something else as a byproduct.
Which is?
Hydrogen gas, H2.
Hydrogen. Okay. That
Yeah.
sounds simple, but it's a big deal in origin of life's theories, isn't it? As a potential fuel source.
A huge deal. Many scientists think it could have been the primary fuel, and this experiment shows a really plausible way it could have been constantly generated right there where life might have been starting.
So the chemistry sets the stage, provides the fuel, but that's not the whole story, is it? They added something else.
They did. They introduced a real living organism, a microbe called Methanococcus genesi.
Sounds like a mouthful.
It is, but it's fascinating. It's a single-celled archaean, a very ancient domain of life, and it's a hyperthermophile.
Meaning it loves extreme heat.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It thrives in boiling temperatures. It was actually first found near a modern deep-sea vent.
Okay, so it's already suited to vent-like conditions. Why this microbe specifically?
Because its metabolism, the way it gets energy, is thought to be very, very old. It uses something called the Acetyl-CoA pathway to basically, well, it consumes hydrogen and produces methane, methanogenesis.
And that pathway is considered ancient.
Yes, relatively simple and believed to be one of the earliest forms of metabolism, a great model for potential early life.
So they took this heat-loving, ancient-style microbe and put it into their lab-made primordial soup, their chemical garden.
Pretty much, yes. They put it with the iron-sulfide minerals that were actively producing hydrogen.
And what happened? Did it just, survive?
It didn't just survive, it went nuts. It grew exponentially. The researchers seemed genuinely surprised by how well it did.
Exponentially. But wait, did they feed it anything else? Like vitamins, nutrients?
No, that's the kicker. Absolutely nothing else was added. No extra nutrients, no vitamins, no trace metals, zero.
Hold on. You're saying this microbe grew, and grew well, just by using the hydrogen gas that was being made by the non-living chemical reactions. The rocks were feeding it.
Essentially, yes. The abiotic, purely chemical reactions were providing the energy source, the hydrogen, and the microbe just used it. It's a stunning demonstration of how early life could have potentially tapped into geochemistry.
Wow. Just using what the environment provided.
And they confirmed it too. They looked at the microbes' genes, and the ones involved in processing hydrogen and generating energy were highly active. It was definitely using the hydrogen fuel.
Incredible. And cultivating these kinds of extreme microbes, that requires specialized facilities, right?
Absolutely. They collaborated with the Archaea Center at the University of Regensburg. Handling these hyperthermophiles needs specific expertise and equipment, which Professor Groman and Dr. Reichelt there provided. It's crucial for this kind of work.
Okay, so we have the early Earth chemistry making hydrogen, and we have an ancient-style microbe thriving on that hydrogen in the lab. How does this lab result connect back to, actual evidence from ancient rocks, from the fossil record?
That's where it gets really compelling. In the lab, the researchers saw that the Archaea cells tended to cluster really close to the iron-sulfide particles, the mechanoite.
Okay.
Now, you compare that observation to the geological record. Some of the oldest fossil evidence we have for microbial life shows these tiny fossils associated with very similar iron-sulfide minerals.
So the fossils are found with the minerals. It's not just that the minerals were around, but they were physically close, like in the experiment.
Exactly. It suggests a direct link. The implication is that the chemical reactions happening as those minerals formed were providing a localized, continuous energy source, the hydrogen, right where those first cells needed it.
So this process, using hydrogen and making methane, this could be the oldest way life learned to make a living.
It looks very likely. This hydrogen-dependent methanogenesis, using that relatively simple acetyl-CoA pathway, is probably the most ancient form of energy generation known in evolutionary history. The original blueprint for getting energy.
Amazing. Just basic geochemistry fueling the very dawn of biology. But this research isn't just about looking back, is it? They're thinking bigger.
Oh, definitely. This opens up huge questions about life elsewhere. If this kind of simple geochemical engine could power life on early Earth, could it be happening now on other planets or moons?
Right. Could there be environments out there where similar Archaea or something like them could survive using the same process?
That's the next frontier for them, and they have a prime suspect in mind.
Which is?
Enceladus, Saturn's moon.
Ah, the icy moon with the subsurface ocean. I've heard about that. NASA's very interested.
Extremely interested, because evidence strongly suggests there's hydrothermal activity happening down there on the sea floor beneath the ice shell, interactions between the rocky core and the liquid water ocean.
Hydrothermal activity.
Yes.
Producing chemicals.
Yeah.
Potentially hydrogen. Just like early Earth.
That is the tantalizing possibility. You might have the same kind of chemical reactions occurring, providing potential energy sources in that dark subsurface ocean.
So are they going to try and test that?
Yes, that's their next big step. They plan to simulate the conditions thought to exist on Enceladus, the pressure, the temperature, the likely chemistry in their lab.
And then add the Archaea.
Exactly. Add Methanococcus johnski or similar microbes and see if they can survive, maybe even grow, in a simulated Enceladus environment feeding off hydrogen produced under those conditions.
Wow. That's incredible. So the same chemistry that might have started life here could actually be fueling life right now on a moon of Saturn.
It's a profound thought, isn't it? It really changes how we think about where life could exist, if it can emerge from these fundamental geological processes.
Maybe it's not such a rare fluke. Maybe microbial life, at least, is more common than we thought.
It certainly makes you wonder. Perhaps the universe is, simmering with these kinds of microbial ecosystems in places we haven't even considered properly yet.
So, wrapping up this deep dive, the big takeaway is this amazing link they've forged between the deep past of Earth, how life first got its energy, and the very real possibility of finding life, or at least habitable conditions, elsewhere.
Yeah, they've shown a light on a plausible pathway for life's first energy right here, and that light now points outwards towards places like Enceladus.
It leaves you with a pretty big question to chew on, doesn't it? If life's beginnings are so tied up with just rocks and water and basic chemistry, what does that really mean for how widespread life might be out there in the cosmos?
It definitely gives you a lot to think about next time you look up at the night sky, or when you hear about missions heading out to explore these ocean worlds. A lot to ponder.
Absolutely. Makes you see those distant icy moons in a whole new light. Thanks for exploring this with us.
My pleasure. Fascinating stuff.
Until next time, keep thinking about those big questions.